Good evening and welcome to the Politica Podcast. Tonight we're actually broadcasting live on Facebook. We got Jason Preston here and the great Roger Stone. And it's a pleasure to have both of you guys in here. I think we're going to have a fun time. You know, I was looking at Twitter just before here, and you know, one of our esteemed members of the press tweeted out something about you hating Mormons, and I just thought you haven't hated on me yet.
That's really disturbing because of course it's baseless. Raw Story, which is some crazy left-wing website, said I have a long history of criticizing the Church of Latter-day Saints, when in fact one of the great highlights of my life was actually meeting former Agriculture Secretary Ezra Taft Benson when I was working for Richard Nixon in 1968. John Huntsman Sr., the longtime Republican National Committee man from Utah, a very close friend of Richard Nixon's, was also a friend of mine, treated me very well when I was a 19-year-old working for Richard Nixon, later during Ronald Reagan's campaigns. I've worked for 3 American presidents. This is a baseless smear. Let me explain why. Jason Preston is over the target. He's running for Congress. I'm here to help him because he's a patriot, because he stands up against tyranny. And the rhinos smell it. So you have this non-journalist, some guy named Schott, who proudly wears a Communist Party t-shirt. He's not a journalist, folks. He's a distortionist. And in this case, he's a liar. I'm a born-again Christian. I hate no one, and there is no history. Where are the citations? Where's the beef, as they say? It's a smear. But it kind of goes with the territory. John, I've worked for 3 Republican presidents, actually 4. Obviously, Richard Nixon, 3 campaigns for Ronald Reagan, 1976, when he challenged Gerald Ford, 1980, 1984. Then, of course, for that great American patriot, Bob Dole, one of the greatest men of the century, in my opinion, would have been a great president, was a great senator, truly a great American. And, of course, Donald Trump. Now, you always read that Roger Stone, a self-described dirty trickster. No, I've never described myself that way. Democrats I have beaten in elections describe me that way, but I have never described myself that way. I'll do anything necessary to elect my candidate within the bounds of the truth and the law. Yeah, politics ain't beanbag. You know, it's a rough and tumble business, and you got to give as good as you get. But I've never done anything illegal to elect anybody. And I was, as you know, targeted in the Mueller witch hunt. 29 FBI agents stormed my home at 6 o'clock in the morning, scared my dogs and my wife half to death. My wife is hearing impaired, so she woke up looking down the barrel of 2 fully automatic M4 assault weapons, not knowing whether it was a home invasion or what had transpired. I had no valid passport. I was not a flight risk. That's proven by the fact that 3 hours later when I was arraigned, the government asked for no cash bond. So they never believed I was a flight risk. This was to pressure me into testifying falsely against Donald Trump, who's been a friend of mine for 42 years. And I refused. And this was a 2-year ordeal. It was horrific. I'm here today because I was redeemed in Jesus Christ. Because when I hit rock bottom, when I was depressed about the fact that I was being railroaded, that I wasn't going to get a fair trial, that my First, Fourth, and Sixth Amendment rights were just being violated, that I was being gagged. I couldn't even defend myself. I was being accused of being a Russian spy when there was no basis for that, or lying to Congress. Lying to Congress. Check Dr. Fauci on that one.
That's right.
This was a frame job. So, yes, I admit to being a libertine in my earlier days. And when I was younger, I did a lot of crazy things. But that was before I was redeemed in Christ. And today, I've kept faith with the Lord. And I believe I was saved from dying in a dank Georgia prison, framed by Robert Mueller and his thugs. And I'm back on the ramparts. So I'm here for Jason Preston.
So what drew you to Jason?
Well, first of all, recognize the problem in the country today is not crazy screwball leftist Democrats, John. The problem today are the gutless, feckless, weak-kneed, lily-livered, corrupt, white wine swilling, brie cheese eating, country club belonging, Volvo driving, establishment Republicans who are in politics to line their pockets in the pockets of their friends. They won't stand up for the U.S. Constitution. They won't stand up for the Republic. It's go along to get along. Now, I'm not going to name any names. I refuse. Mitt Romney. I'm not going to point fingers. Lindsey Graham. And in this case, John Curtis is just another of the same ilk. They stand for nothing. When I learned about Jason Preston's campaign and the unique nature of your convention system, where I see a real opportunity to strike the first blow for liberty in what I think is a coming red tidal wave, but this will be a Patriots tidal wave. In other words, it's time to stand up against tyranny, and Republican delegates in this state are going to have the opportunity to do that on Saturday. In all honesty, I wouldn't miss it for the world.
That's great. And how are you feeling now?
I mean, ecstatic. Ecstatic. Especially from someone who's not a politician, never wanted to be a politician, but just someone who sees what's at stake in this country, and who's got a father that has girls, that see we have leaders in our own state allowing men to go into our girls' locker rooms. Seeing a country where our borders are down, our elections are at question, the morality, the family's collapsing. I'm at a point where I have to wonder what kind of country my daughter who just got engaged, what kind of country are my grandkids going to grow up in? And nations fall. Nations fall. And to not see the writing on the wall in this country, from the currency, from the borders, to the elections, from the moral collapse of the people,
the lockdowns.
The lockdowns. Freedom is on its knees. The Constitution is in trouble, and I believe that the answer isn't career politicians. So for a regular guy to stand up and start running, I'm not a millionaire, I'm not a politician, but to go from where I was to where I am sitting right here with, a senator and with Roger Stone. To me, I'm living. I think I'm probably still in shock of the situation I find myself in, but that's what's exciting. There is a wave. We're fed up with career politicians. We want regular people to stand up, farmers to leave their farms, regular people to stand up and say, you know what, we can go and serve for a couple of years, try to do our part to fight against the system that you have fought so much against, and then go back home and see if we can't save this country. And I firmly believe we can.
Well, it's interesting to me, Roger, that you've come out to join this, and I've heard a lot of people say, well, Stone's in it for the money. There's and this is interesting.
Well, you can check the Federal Election Commission reports. This man hasn't paid me a nickel. I'm here because I'm a believer. First time I have been to Utah, but anytime I do go to a state, I do some reading. And here's what I found. My hat's off to you, John, because you've had the courage to file legislation to stop the promulgation of this biocritical race theory to public school children. No, everything wrong with America is not because of white people. That's racist. It's also historically incorrect. We are the party of Lincoln. We're the party of civil rights. The Democrats talked about criminal justice reform and the fact that the laws passed by Joe Biden and Bill Clinton are responsible for the mass incarceration of more black people than any time in history. For the first time, nonviolent crime of possession of small amounts of drugs. People in those instances belong in drug treatment programs, not in prison, but they were sent there by Joe Biden, chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, who passed that vile legislation, and Bill Clinton, who signed it. And who is it who gave us criminal justice reform? President Donald Trump. In the First Step First Step Act and the Second Chance Act. Democrats talk about it. They milked the black community for votes for it for 30 years, but when Barack Obama has a majority in both houses, he does nothing. So my hat is off to you, John, for having the courage to carry that CRT bill, and it is only because you're a disgraceful rhino governor that we have not blocked the teaching of this vile, radical ideology to school children. It is as repugnant as telling kids there's more than one gender. And you don't need to decide what you are now, a little boy or a little girl, when they're in the first grade, when they're not old enough to even understand the concepts that are in it. That's not hateful. That's common sense. Yeah. So this is a true conservative.
We just overrode the governor on his veto of our transgender sports bill.
Yeah, I saw that. And it's a step in the right direction.
But the fact that he's pushing it as the governor of what should be one of the most conservative states in the country, how do we end up here? That's what I find mind-blowing.
Well, but a better question is, where do we go from here? Because it isn't over yet. In fact, because we believe in the Bible, we actually know how this comes out. Good does win in the end. What we don't know is what God's plan is. You want to make God laugh? Tell him about your plans.
Yeah.
But I really believe, and I've talked about this extensively, it was Reverend Franklin Graham who reached out to me and who in the end convinced me that only redemption in Christ could save my life. He was right. I don't agree with him on vaccinations, by the way, but I still think he's a good man. I met Billy Graham twice in my life. Thought he was one of the greatest men of the 20th century. But we're on a mission here to save this country. This is the last beacon of freedom in the world. And the Democrats are hell-bent on canceling the Constitution. And then you have shills like this guy Schott, who's not a journalist. He's a distortionist. He's a propagandist. He seems to be a little bit of a gadfly. But I only give interviews to legitimate journalists. I don't talk to freaks or nuts.
So let me ask you about that, because a lot of people I talk to, their concern is we don't have just a problem with media here in Utah. We have a problem with media across the country that is clearly spinning false narratives, that is clearly seeking to divide the people against each other, putting race a part of every story, pushing collectivist ideas. How do we fight back? Because that is something that is a huge issue, and it's, again, we're dealing with it with a reporter here, but it's not just a reporter here. Both of our news stations here tend to lean very liberal.
The answer is very clear. The answer in 2016 to that question was the internet. So the corporate media domination that existed today existed then, but the internet was free. There were no barriers, and therefore Donald Trump was able to break through, and he was able to answer the smears on him using the internet as a base. 2020 is the first time in our history now when all mass communications of any kind are both controlled and censored, whether it is network television or cable television or corporate radio or print media like newspapers and magazines. And now the censorship on the internet is complete. I'm banned for life on Twitter. I don't even know why. They never even told me why. I think I hurt Jake Tapper's feelings or something.
But the good news is we have terrorists on there, so at least they're labeled.
No, it's Al Qaeda can have a page, but Roger Stone cannot have.
Well, and the sitting president of the United States gets kicked off of Twitter.
I told him in 2017 that he had to deal with the issue of internet censorship